Three outlaws rode onto Blackwood Ranch in Montana's Paradise Valley, looking to intimidate a grieving widow. They found a former Delta Force operative instead. What happened next would expose a multi-million-dollar horse theft ring, bring down a corrupt sheriff's department, and unleash hell on the most dangerous crime syndicate in the Northwest. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The autumn wind whistled through the cottonwoods as Olivia Mitchell watched the dust cloud approaching her ranch. The morning light caught the chrome of three Harley-Davidsons winding their way up the gravel road toward her property. At her feet, Rex, her Belgian Malinois, let out a low growl. Olivia placed a calming hand on his head, though her own muscles had tensed with the instinctive combat awareness that 15 years of special operations had burned into her nerve endings. "Easy, boy," she murmured, cataloguing details with practiced precision. The lead rider's patches marked him as a member of the Iron Wolves MC, a motorcycle club that had been making trouble across 3 counties. Their presence this far up Paradise Valley meant nothing good. Since Thomas's death 6 months ago, Olivia had caught their scouts watching the ranch, testing her defenses, looking for weaknesses. She adjusted her flannel shirt, carefully concealing the knife at her belt and the pistol at the small of her back. The scars on her hands, souvenirs from close-quarters combat in Kandahar, were harder to hide. But most people saw what they wanted to see, just a grieving rancher's widow trying to keep her husband's dream alive, not a woman who'd spent over a decade hunting America's enemies in the world's darkest corners. The motorcycles pulled up in front of the ranch house, their engines deliberately loud enough to spook the horses in the nearby corrals. Wade Butcher Erickson, the Iron Wolves' local president, dismounted first. His scarred face twisted into what he probably thought was a charming smile as he surveyed the property. His gaze lingered on Olivia for a moment too long before turning, to take in the expansive pastures and well-maintained buildings of Blackwood Ranch. "Mrs. Mitchell," Butcher called out, his voice carrying an edge that made the morning air seem colder. "Sheriff Coleman sends his regards. Says you missed last week's Ranchers Association meeting. He's concerned about your commitment to the community." Olivia kept her expression neutral, though her mind was already gaming out tactical scenarios. The tall one they called Snake was carrying a knife in his boot, and the mountain of muscle known as Tank had a poorly concealed pistol under his cut. More importantly, she noted the fresh rope burns on their hands and the distinct smell of horse liniment clinging to their clothes. This wasn't just about intimidation. "Been busy with the fall roundup," Olivia replied evenly. "Tell the sheriff I appreciate his concern." Rex stayed at her heel, but his ears were forward, his body coiled with the same tactical awareness that had made him invaluable during their deployments together. "See, that's not really good enough," Butcher said, moving closer. "Things are changing in Paradise Valley. Sheriff wants to make sure all the local ranchers are properly represented, especially the ones running operations alone." The threat wasn't subtle. Since Thomas's death, 3 other small ranches had sold out under mysterious circumstances. There had been accidents, missing stock, fires that the sheriff's department was suspiciously slow to investigate. Olivia had seen similar tactics in a dozen conflict zones: create problems, then offer protection for a price. "I've managed." "Just fine," Olivia said, her voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that had once commanded elite operators in the field. "The sheriff should focus on actual law enforcement instead of running errands for thugs." The ranch yard went dead silent. Butcher's fake smile vanished. "What did you just say to me?" Snake and Tank moved to flank him, but Olivia was already shifting her stance, preparing for what she knew would come next. Rex's growl deepened, a sound that would have warned anyone with sense that they were dealing with more than just a farm dog. "I said," Olivia spoke softly, but her voice carried, across the silent yard, that the sheriff should do his job. Butcher tried to close the distance, but Rex's snarl stopped him short. The dog's training was showing, not lunging, not attacking, but presenting a clear, tactical barrier. Olivia hadn't spent years working with military canine units without learning how to use a dog's presence to control a situation. "Lady, you have no idea who you're dealing with," Butcher snarled. Olivia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, I do. Wade Butcher Erickson, dishonorable discharge from the Army in 13. The Iron Wolves have been running protection rackets across 3 counties, but lately you've moved up to bigger operations. Those rope burns on Snake's hands aren't from honest ranch work. You're running something much larger through the old Morrison Horse auction house." The color drained from Butcher's face. Tank's hand twitched toward his weapon, but Olivia's stance shifted slightly and Rex's growl kicked up a notch. They were starting to realize this wasn't going the way they'd planned. "Here's what happens next," she continued. "You and your friends leave. We forget this happened. Or we find out just how much damage a Delta Force operative and her combat-trained K9 can do before you hit the ground. Your choice." For a long moment, nobody moved. The autumn wind rustled through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of pine from the distant mountains. Then Butcher raised his hands in surrender, a cold calculation replacing the shock in his eyes. "All right, we're leaving," he said, backing away slowly. "But this isn't over." "It can be," Olivia replied, maintaining her position as the 3 bikers mounted their motorcycles. "That's up to you." As the Iron Wolves roared away down the gravel road, Olivia's mind was already racing through scenarios. She'd just painted a target on her back, but if her instincts were right, the rope burns and the auction house connection pointed to something much bigger than biker gang intimidation. The Iron Wolves were just the muscle for a larger operation. Olivia scratched Rex behind the ears, the familiar gesture calming them both. "Good boy," she whispered. The Belgian Malinois had been by her side through 3 combat tours, and now he was her partner in protecting the ranch Thomas had loved so much. The thought of her late husband sent a familiar ache through her chest. He'd never known about her past, about the classified operations or the lives she'd taken in service to her country. She'd been ready to leave that life behind, to be just. Olivia Mitchell, rancher's wife. The sound of an approaching vehicle drew her attention. A dusty Ford pickup came up the road, moving with the deliberate pace of someone who knew the territory. Olivia recognized Matt Cooper, her nearest neighbor, and one of the few local ranchers who'd stood by her after Thomas's death. The old Marine got out of his truck, his weathered face grim. "Saw the Iron Wolves heading out," he said, leaning against his truck's hood. "Figured I should check on you." "I'm fine," Olivia replied, but her tactical mind was already processing. "New information. Matt, what do you know about the Morrison auction house?" Cooper's expression darkened. "Used to be a legitimate operation. Old John Morrison ran it straight for 40 years. Since his son took over and partnered with the sheriff's department, things have changed. Lots of horses moving through there. At night, papers that don't quite add up." Olivia nodded, pieces falling into place. "And the missing stock from the Henderson and Weber ranches?" "Disappeared right after they refused to sell," Cooper confirmed. "Sheriff's department didn't find anything, of course. Word is they're running stolen horses through the auction house, using legitimate sales to launder them. High-end quarter horses, champion bloodlines. It's a multi-million-dollar operation." Olivia's phone buzzed. A message from a number she hadn't seen in years. Satellite shows major criminal activity at Morrison Auction House, multiple organized crime connections, support available if needed. Say the word. Jackson. The pieces were falling into place. The Iron Wolves weren't just working for the corrupt sheriff. They were muscle for an organized crime syndicate using the auction house to move stolen horses across state lines. The accidents at local ranches, the pressure to sell, it was all part of a larger operation. "I need to know everything about that auction house," Olivia said. "Entry points, security, staff movements." Cooper studied her for a long moment, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You're not just Thomas's widow, are you?" Olivia met his gaze steadily. "Let's just say I've dealt with operations like this before." The old Marine nodded slowly. "My son works security there, night shift. He's been trying to document what's going on, but it's dangerous. The Iron Wolves handle their internal enforcement. I need his intel," Olivia replied. "And Matt, you should know getting involved in this could be risky." Cooper straightened, the old military bearing showing through. "This valley's been my home for 40 years. I watched them push out the Hendersons, destroy the Weber place. I'm not standing by anymore." Olivia's tactical mind was already formulating plans. The auction house would be heavily guarded, but she'd breached better defended positions with fewer resources. More importantly, she knew how organizations like this thought, how they operated. They would be expecting resistance from the front, not realizing the predator was already inside their perimeter. Her phone buzzed again. Jackson's satellite intel showed increased activity at the auction house, multiple vehicles arriving, professional security patterns. They were preparing for something big. "They'll come for you now," Cooper warned. "Once they realize you're a threat, they'll send professionals." Olivia checked her weapons with practiced efficiency, Rex alert at her side. "Good," she replied, coldly. "Let them come. But first, we need to talk to someone who sees everything that moves through that auction house. The Wolves might keep their secrets from law enforcement, but they talk freely in front of the office staff." Cooper's eyes widened. "Linda Morrison, John's daughter. She still works the books, even after her brother took over. Been there 30 years. "Then let's pay Linda a visit," Olivia said, already moving toward her truck. The familiar weight of her concealed pistol was reassuring against her back. She sent a short response to Jackson. "Stand by, recon only. Paradise Valley's about to get interesting." Morrison's auction house sat on the outskirts of Paradise Valley, its weathered buildings casting long shadows in the late afternoon sun. Olivia positioned her truck with a clear view of both exits, noting the security cameras, these ones functional, covering the main entrance. Cooper parked his pickup in the shadows, while Rex maintained silent watchfulness from the back. "Seat!" The office door chimed as Olivia entered. Linda Morrison looked up from her computer, her silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving her a grandmotherly appearance that didn't quite mask the sharp intelligence in her eyes. At this hour, only 2 other people occupied the office, both wearing Iron Wolves cuts, both trying too hard to look casual. "Coffee?" Linda asked, already pouring a cup. "Best in the valley." Her voice carried the weight of decades spent watching Paradise Valley's transformation. Olivia slid into a chair, positioning herself to watch the bikers in the reflection of the office window. "Heard you make good pie, too." "Only person who makes better pie is my mother, God rest her soul," Linda replied, her voice dropping though. "Lately, business has been different. Too many new faces, too many night operations spooking the local." "Stock!" The bikers stood, making a show of gathering their papers. One brushed deliberately close to Olivia as they left, trying to intimidate. She didn't bother turning around. Once their motorcycles roared away, Linda's demeanor changed completely. "Matt Cooper called ahead," she said quietly. "Said you might have questions about our recent changes." Olivia sipped her coffee. It was excellent. "Tell me about the night operations." 3 months ago, my brother James partnered with some new investors. Now we're moving horses at all hours. Expensive trailers, professional handlers, the kind of security you'd expect for moving gold bars, not quarter horses." Linda's hands trembled slightly. Last month, my niece Katie identified one of the horses. It was Weber's prize stallion, the one that supposedly died in that mysterious stable fire. Cooper joined them, badge now visible from his role as a local deputy. Reserve. How deep does it go, Linda? Deep enough that my brother won't let me near the main records anymore, but I've been keeping my own books. She pulled out a thumb drive. They're moving horses from ranches across 5 states, using our reputation to launder stolen stock through legitimate auctions. The Iron Wolves provide security, handle any problems that arise. Olivia's phone vibrated. A message from Jackson. Satellite confirms major transport operations, professional security rotation, pattern matches organize crime horse theft ring operating out of Canada. They're moving product south. They're using the old cattle trails, Linda continued. The ones that run through the national forest, perfect for moving horses without detection. James has some of the Forest Service in his pocket. They look the other way. The sheriff? Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer. Coleman's. Been dirty for years, Cooper spat. Ever since his brother got involved with the wolves. Now half the department is either on the payroll or too scared to act. Linda placed another file on the desk. 2 days ago, I overheard James on the phone. Something big's coming. They're clearing the auction schedule, posting extra security, mentioned someone called the Handler arriving to inspect the operation. Olivia went still. The Handler. A name. She'd heard in briefings during her final mission, a major player in international livestock theft, known for making examples of anyone who interfered with operations. The mission that had convinced her to leave Delta Force and seek a quieter life? When? She asked quietly. 3 days. They're having a big auction that night. Mandatory attendance for all major ranches in the valley. Linda leaned forward. Perfect cover while they move whatever they don't want seen. Suddenly Cooper's radio crackled to life. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north. Professional. Formation, SUVs and bikes. Olivia moved to the window. 4 black SUVs led by Iron Wolves riders were making their way down the main road. The lead vehicle stopped outside the auction house. Linda, does the office still connect to the old storage barn? Olivia asked quickly. The older woman smiled. Doors behind the filing cabinets. Barn connects to the back pasture. Cooper, get Linda out. I'll draw their attention. Olivia checked her weapon with practiced precision. Rex, with me. Like old times? Cooper asked. The former Marines. Voice steady. Something like that, Olivia replied. She triggered a small device on her belt, a gift from her Delta Force days. Every security camera in the complex went dark simultaneously. The office door chimed as heavy boots entered. Told you this wasn't over, Butcher's voice carried across the empty room. Boss wants to talk. Olivia didn't turn around. Your boss can make an appointment. I'm finishing my coffee. More footsteps entered, professional operators by their movement patterns. Not typical gang muscle, but private security contractors. This was about to get interesting. Not a request, lady, one of the contractors spoke. Though I got to admit, you've got stones. Not many people stand up to the Iron Wolves in their own territory. Now Olivia turned, studying them with cold amusement. This isn't Wolves' territory, not anymore. Paradise Valley belongs to its people. You're just parasites who haven't figured out you're dying yet. Take her, Butcher ordered. Olivia smiled. Sometimes the best operations started with letting the enemy think they had the upper hand. As the contractors moved forward, she calculated angles, positions, and the exact pressure points that would cause maximum damage with minimal effort. Time to show them why Delta Force operators were the apex predators in any environment, even a small-town auction house. The first contractor never saw the coffee pot coming. Olivia launched it in a fluid motion, scalding liquid and ceramic, creating instant chaos as he staggered back. She was already moving, years of close-quarters combat training taking over. Rex burst into action beside her, years of military canine training evident in every calculated move. The second contractor reached for his concealed weapon, but found his arm locked in a joint manipulation that sent him crashing into Butcher. The third made the mistake of telegraphing a wide punch. Olivia slipped inside his guard, using his momentum to drive him through a desk. "Professional security," she taunted, flowing between them like water. "You move like mall cops." Two more contractors burst through the door, these ones openly carrying weapons. Olivia dove behind an overturned filing cabinet as bullets splintered wood and shattered coffee mugs. Rex had already flanked them, his powerful jaws finding one contractor's weapon arm with brutal precision. "You're trapped," Butcher called out. "No way out except through us." Olivia pulled a small device from her jacket, another gift from her Delta Force days. "Actually," she replied, "you're the ones who are trapped." She triggered the device. Every light in the office exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the room into darkness. The contractor's tactical lights snapped on, exactly what she'd anticipated. In the dark, they became perfect targets. Moving silently, Olivia emerged behind them. The first contractor went down to a precise strike to the brainstem. The second spun, firing wildly, but she was already gone. The third found himself disarmed and unconscious before he registered her presence. Butcher backed toward the door, drawing a knife. "What the hell are you?" "Someone who's dealt with better criminals than you," Olivia replied, her voice seeming to come from everywhere in the darkness. "Tell your boss, the real one, not Coleman, that Paradise Valley isn't his playground anymore." "The handler will gut you," Butcher snarled, still trying to locate her. "He's dealt with operators before." Olivia's voice hardened. "I know, I was there." Before Butcher could respond, she struck 3 precise hits that left him gasping on the floor. As police sirens wailed in the distance, she retrieved her phone, snapping photos of the contractors' IDs. Jackson would be able to trace their connections. Cooper's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Local police incoming. Coleman's leading them personally. Linda secure. Safe at my ranch. My son's coordinating with some trusted deputies." Olivia surveyed the unconscious contractors. "Time to disappear. Meet at Fallback Point Alpha." She whistled softly, and Rex appeared at her side, both of them slipping into the back storage room as Coleman's vehicle screeched into the parking lot. The passage to the barn was narrow but navigable, clearly part of the original ranch's design. Olivia moved silently through the darkness, her mind already processing the night's intelligence. The handler's impending arrival changed everything. He'd recognize her, know what she was capable of. Her phone vibrated. "Jackson again." "Satellite. Shows major movement at the auction house. They're accelerating operations. Teams standing by." "Not yet," she replied. "Let them think they're in control. I need 48 hours to set the board." The passage emerged in the old barn as promised. Cooper was waiting with his truck, engine idling. As they pulled away, Olivia could hear Coleman's angry voice. "Find her! I want this whole valley locked down." "My son sent this," Cooper said once they were clear, handing her a thumb drive. "Security rotations, delivery schedules, everything he's documented over the past month." Olivia plugged the drive into her phone. The operation was even bigger than she'd suspected. The auction house was just one node in a massive network moving stolen horses across North America. The handler wasn't coming just to deal with her. He was coming to expand the operation. Coleman called an emergency ranchers meeting. Cooper reported as they drove. "They're spooked. Butcher wasn't supposed to engage directly, especially not with contractors present. They've exposed their hand too early." Olivia studied the security schedules. The auction house's defenses were extensive, but she'd breached better. More importantly, she knew how the handler thought, how he'd react. He'd want to make an example of her, just like he had with other threats to his operation. "Cooper, I need every detail about this auction. Security, attendance, everything. The old Marine nodded. They're requiring all major ranches present, using the main auction arena. Single central room, 2 exits. They'll use it as cover. While they move something big through the back pastures, Olivia mused. Or someone. She thought of the handler, of the brutality she'd witnessed during her last mission. Get your trusted deputies ready, but quietly. For now, we let Coleman think he's got control of the situation. Olivia's eyes hardened as they drove through the darkness. In 3 days, they'd learn why you never bring organized crime operations to a valley protected by a Delta Force operative. The handler was coming, bringing his expertise in terror and enforcement. But he'd find more than small-town prey waiting in the Montana night. He'd find a predator who'd learned from past mistakes, one who now hunted criminals for sport. Dawn crept over the Absaroka Mountains as Olivia surveyed the auction house from her concealed position in the tree line. Through high-powered binoculars, she watched Coleman's deputies establishing checkpoints on major roads. Their positions were sloppy, leaving multiple approach routes uncovered. Amateur work. Her phone displayed satellite imagery from Jackson, showing increased activity at the auction house. Trucks moved in and out with military precision, while armed guards patrolled in organized patterns. These weren't iron wolves. Their movements showed professional training. Target count? Cooper's voice came through her earpiece from his observation post near the main road. 30 plus at the auction house, Olivia replied. Mix of contractors and gang security. They're fortifying key positions, expecting trouble. Rex lay silent beside her, his trained eyes tracking movement patterns. The Belgian Malinois had spent years working alongside her in combat zones, and his tactical awareness remained razor-sharp. He sensed her tension, staying close and alert. Cooper's son Mark joined her surveillance position, carrying fresh intelligence. My guys confirmed 6 more stolen horses moved through last night. All champion bloodlines. Papers were perfect forgeries. They're clearing the holding pens, moving everything valuable out. Olivia's jaw tightened, just like their operation up north, liquidating assets before the handler arrived. She'd seen his handiwork firsthand, found the remains of those who'd crossed him. They're using the old cattle trails. Multiple routes through the national forest, Mark confirmed, spreading out updated maps. Perfect for moving horses without detection. Forest Service patrols are being redirected thanks to Coleman. Olivia studied the trail system. These routes all converge here. She pointed to a natural bottleneck between 2 ridges. Perfect ambush point. The Devil's Gate, Cooper added as he joined them, used to be the only way to move large herds through these mountains. My grandfather ran cattle there 70 years ago. Olivia's phone buzzed. Jackson again. Facial recognition confirmed 3 former Special Forces contractors at the auction. House Blackwater alumni, serious players. They're bringing in more muscle. They're preparing for the handler's arrival, Olivia mused. Speaking of which, Cooper, what's the status on the auction? Mandatory attendance confirmed. They're posting armed security at all entrances, making a show of force. Mark leaned forward. Perfect time to hit their staging areas while their attention is divided. No, Olivia replied. They'll expect that. We need to be smarter. She pointed to the trail maps. These old ranch trails, they connect to the auction house grounds? Cooper nodded. Run right under the main arena. My grandfather helped build those tunnels during Prohibition, used them to move whiskey when the revenuers came through. Then we use their own tactics against them, Olivia said. While they're watching the roads, we'll own the underground. She keyed her radio. Mark, brief your trusted deputies. Basic op plans only. No details. A convoy of black SUVs rolled through the valley, heading toward the auction house. Olivia tracked them through her binoculars, noting faces, weapons, patterns. These weren't just security contractors. They moved like covert operations specialists. They're Getting nervous, Cooper observed. All this firepower for a small Montana valley. They should be nervous, Olivia replied coldly. They just don't know why yet. Her phone vibrated with another message from Jackson. Handler's private jet filed flight plan. Arrival in 24 hours. Teams in position. Perimeter surveillance established. Say the word. Maintain observation only, she replied. We do this right. They won't know we're here until it's too late. In the distance, more vehicles approached the auction house. The enemy was gathering their forces, fortifying their positions, preparing for a siege. But they were preparing for the wrong kind of... Right, they think size and strength win battles, Olivia said, packing away her binoculars. But in this environment, against this type of opponent, victory goes to whoever controls the high ground. She turned to her allies. Time to show them why Delta Force specializes in unconventional warfare. As morning fully broke over Paradise Valley, Olivia Mitchell began transforming the quiet Montana landscape into an elaborate trap. The handler was coming to inspect his operation, never suspecting he was walking into an ambush, 3 decades of special operations experience in the making. The storm was gathering. Soon it would break over the valley like an avalanche, washing away the corruption that had taken root. When it was over, the organized crime syndicates would learn a valuable lesson about choosing their territory more carefully. Olivia crouched in the shadows of the old ranch tunnels, her night vision revealing the intricate network of passages carved into the valley's bedrock. Mark's intel had been perfect. Guard rotations, security systems, and most importantly, confirmation of 12 stolen horses held in the main stable, worth millions on the black market. 3 main guard posts, she whispered into her tactical. Surveillance cameras at key junctions, motion sensors covering primary routes. But not the maintenance shafts, Mark's voice replied from his hidden position. They think they're too narrow for anyone to use. Olivia smiled grimly. Delta Force training had included far tighter spaces. Locations of the sensor control boxes? Junction. B7 and the main security office. They're running everything through a closed network. Cooper's voice crackled through the comm. Olivia, we've got movement up top. 3 more SUVs just entered the property, different pattern than the contractors. Through her thermal scope, Olivia watched heat signatures moving through the auction house above. Disciplined, professional, but with a distinctive aggression in their movements. Wet work teams, she whispered, getting everything cleaned up before the handler arrives. Her phone vibrated silently. Jackson's latest update. Facial recognition confirms 2 known hitmen. These aren't standard security, they're cleaners. Olivia keyed her comm. All units maintain distance. Let them think they're alone up there. She switched channels. Cooper, status on the ranch house. Equipment's prepped. Your friend Jackson's gear makes my old Marine kit look like toys. Through her thermal scope, Olivia picked up more movement. A group of iron wolves escorting someone through the main arena. The figure moved with authority, studying the operation's security with professional scrutiny. New player, Olivia whispered. Male, 6 foot, military bearing, conducting security review. That's Victor, Mark confirmed. The handler's advance man. Been here since yesterday, upgrading security protocols. Olivia's jaw tightened. She'd encountered Victor's work before. He'd been the handler's security chief during her final mission. The operation that went wrong, that cost innocent lives. That convinced her to leave Delta Force and seek peace in Montana's quieter corners. Getting additional readings, she reported. Multiple heat signatures in the main stable, consistent with Mark's intel on the stolen horses. Those are our neighbors. Animals. Cooper's voice was tight with controlled anger. Champions, bloodlines built over generations, stolen by thugs. Not for long, Olivia promised. Mark, I need detailed routes to the control room. Victor will have changed security patterns, but he can't change the building's architecture. Her phone lit up with another message from Jackson. Handler's jet on final approach. Ghost teams tracking ground support across 3 states. This is bigger than Paradise Valley. It ends here, Olivia replied. Have the teams ready. When we move, we hit everything simultaneously. She switched back to the main channel. Cooper, coordinate with your people. I want staged accidents ready to block major roads when we give the signal. Mark, get word to the trusted ranchers. When the shooting starts, they need their people clear. Already done, Mark confirmed. The auction arena will be the only place open. Olivia began her silent retreat through the tunnels, cataloguing positions for the charges that would reshape this underground battlefield. Victor was good, one of the best in the business at security operations. But he was preparing for a frontal assault, a direct confrontation. He wasn't ready for a shadow war, for an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish back into the darkness. There, sealing their own tomb, Olivia said quietly. They just don't know it yet. Above ground, Paradise Valley continued its normal routines, but beneath the surface, the pieces were moving into place for an operation that would rip the heart out of an international crime syndicate. The handler was coming to inspect his kingdom. He'd find instead a hunting ground prepared by a predator who'd learned from past mistakes. The auction arena filled slowly as evening approached. Local ranchers, business owners, and curiosity seekers filed in under the watchful eyes of iron wolves and professional security. Olivia watched through rifle optics from her concealed position as a private helicopter touched down behind the main building. "Handlers here," Cooper reported, "moving into position with heavy security." "All units, execute Phase 1, Olivia commanded. Across Paradise Valley, carefully planned chaos erupted. Power transformers exploded in synchronized sequence, plunging selected areas into darkness. Emergency generators kicked in at the auction house, exactly as planned. "What the hell?" Coleman's voice crackled across the police band. "Get units to the transformer stations." Olivia smiled coldly. They were reacting exactly as expected, spreading their forces thin. Phase 2, execute. In the tunnels beneath the auction house, shadow warriors moved. The first guard died silently, a ghost team operator materializing from darkness. The second had time for half a surprised breath before precision violence ended him. "Contact at Junction 7, Mark reported. "They're moving the horses." Olivia was already advancing through maintenance shafts, paralleling the main stable. Victor had prepared for a front assault, for an enemy trying to fight their way in. He wasn't ready for operators who were already inside his security perimeter. The handler's voice carried through her surveillance devices as he addressed the gathered crowd. "Change is coming to Paradise Valley," he announced smoothly. "Those who adapt will prosper, those who resist." He let the threat hang. "Now," Olivia commanded, "all units execute Phase 3. Across the valley, chaos erupted. EMP devices disabled cartel vehicles at predetermined ambush points. Cooper's deputies implemented rolling roadblocks, cutting off escape routes. In the tunnels, ghost team operators struck with surgical precision. "Horses secured," Mark reported, moving them to safety. Olivia advanced through the darkness toward the main arena. The handler was down there, inspecting his operation one last time. Victor would have multiple escape routes planned, contingencies for every scenario. But they hadn't planned for this, for an enemy who turned their own fortress against them. "You're surrounded," Olivia's voice echoed through the arena's sound system. "Your security is compromised. Your escape routes blocked. Surrender now." The handler's laugh was cold and cultured. "Ah, the widow reveals herself. I wondered when we'd meet. You've caused quite a bit of trouble, my dear." "I'm just getting started," Olivia replied, triggering the charges that plunged the arena into darkness. Rex's growl echoed through the building as chaos erupted. What followed was a symphony of violence, a deadly dance choreographed through years of special operations experience. Olivia moved like a ghost, Rex at her side, as they systematically dismantled the handler's security. Victor fell first, never seeing the attack that ended his career. The professional contractors found themselves fighting shadows, never finding their target. In the end, Olivia faced the handler alone in his private office, her weapon-trained center mass. "Fascinating," he said, straightening his tie. "I almost regret having to kill you." Olivia smiled coldly. "That's your mistake, thinking you're still in control." Above them, Paradise Valley had gone quiet. The underground war was ending, but in the handler's office, one final reckoning remained. When it was over, when the valley's stolen horses were returned and its corrupt officials exposed, Olivia Mitchell would return to her ranch, to the peace she'd sought in these mountains. But the criminal syndicates would remember. They would tell stories about Paradise Valley, about the quiet widow who turned out to be something far deadlier. They would learn to be more careful about where they brought their operations. Because sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The morning sun painted Paradise Valley's peaks golden as Olivia Mitchell stood on her front porch, watching the last of the federal vehicles leave her property. 1 week had passed since the showdown at Morrison's auction house. The handler was in federal custody, along with Victor and most of the Iron Wolves' leadership. Sheriff Coleman and his corrupt deputies were facing multiple indictments. Rex lay at her feet, ever vigilant despite the peaceful morning. The Belgian Malinois had earned his rest. His training had proved invaluable during the operation, just as it had in countless missions overseas. Olivia's phone buzzed with a message from Jackson. "Handler talking. Operation bigger than we," he thought. Criminal networks across 3 countries. Ghost teams moving on secondary targets. "You sure you won't reconsider joining the task force?" The offer was tempting. Leading a specialized unit targeting criminal syndicates would put her skills to good use. But as she looked out over the ranch Thomas had loved so much, she knew her answer. "The ranch is home now," she replied. "But keep me in mind if anything. Big heads this way again." Cooper's truck appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust as it approached. The old Marine had been instrumental in coordinating with federal authorities, ensuring that the stolen horses were returned to their rightful owners. He wasn't alone. Linda Morrison sat in the passenger seat. "Morning," Cooper called out as they approached. "Thought you might want to see this." He handed her a thick folder. "Linda's been going through the auction house records. What she found goes back decades." Olivia flipped through the documents, her tactical mind processing the information. The handler's operation hadn't just appeared in Paradise Valley. It had been built slowly, corrupting officials and intimidating locals over years. "The feds are impressed," Linda added. "They're using the records to track similar operations across the country. Seems the handler's methods were consistent. Find vulnerable communities, infiltrate local law enforcement, use legitimate businesses as cover." But they never expected to find a Delta Force operator hiding out as a rancher's widow, Cooper grinned. Olivia's mind drifted to Thomas. He'd never known about her past, about the classified operations or the lives she'd taken. But he'd loved this land, these mountains, and the community that called them home. Protecting his legacy meant protecting all of it. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Mark Cooper. "County Commission meeting today. They're voting on new oversight measures for livestock sales. Looks like Paradise Valley's cleaning house. The Iron Wolves are finished in Montana," Cooper reported, words spreading through the criminal networks. "Nobody wants to risk running operations in areas that might be protected by former special operations personnel." Olivia smiled, scratching Rex behind the ears. "Good. Maybe they'll think twice about targeting small communities." Linda cleared her throat. "There's something else. The Ranchers Association is meeting next week. They want you to take over as head of security for the valley. Official this time, no more shadows." Olivia considered the offer. It would mean stepping into the light, using her skills openly to protect the community. But maybe that's what Paradise Valley needed. Someone who could stand between honest ranchers and those who would prey on them. Her phone lit up with another update from Jackson. Handler's intelligence leading to major busts across the Northwest. Criminal syndicates in chaos. You started something big in that valley. Looking out over the mountains, Olivia felt a deep sense of peace. She'd come to Paradise Valley seeking quiet, trying to escape the violence of her past. Instead, she'd found a new purpose, a new way to use her skills to protect others. "Tell the association I'll consider it," she told Linda. "But first, we need to make sure every rancher in this valley knows how to protect themselves. No more easy targets." Cooper nodded approvingly. Already got some of the younger ranchers asking about training, self-defense, security measures, the works. They want to be ready if trouble comes again. Rex's ears perked up as another vehicle approached, a federal SUV this time. Olivia recognized the driver, Agent Catherine Chen, FBI Organized Crime Task Force. "More questions?" Olivia asked as the agent approached. "Actually, a warning," Chen replied. "We're hearing chatter. Some of the handler's old associates aren't happy about losing their Montana operation. They might try to send a message." Olivia's smile was cold. "Let them try. Paradise Valley isn't the soft target they think it is. Not anymore." As if to emphasize her point, a group of local ranchers rode past on patrol, their rifles visible, their movements showing the training they'd recently received. The valley was changing, becoming stronger, more resilient. "The handler thought he could own this valley through fear and corruption," Olivia said quietly. "He never understood what makes a community strong. It's not about control. It's about people standing together, protecting what matters." The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the valley mist. Olivia Mitchell, former Delta Force operator turned rancher's widow, stood watch over her adopted home. The storm had passed, but she remained vigilant, ready to defend Paradise Valley against any threat, because sometimes the most effective guardian is the one hiding in plain sight, watching, waiting, ready to remind the wolves why they should choose their hunting grounds more carefully. 2 months after the handler's arrest, Olivia stood at the gates of Fort Carson, Colorado. The military base brought back memories, years of training, missions, the weight of command. But today's visit was different. She wasn't here as an operator, but as a witness. The handler's trial had revealed connections to criminal organizations across the globe. His testimony had led to dozens of arrests, the dismantling of multiple trafficking rings, and the recovery of millions in stolen livestock. But more importantly, it had exposed how vulnerable small communities were to organized crime. Olivia's phone buzzed with a message from Cooper. "Training programs going well. 26 ranchers completed basic security courses. Valleys getting stronger every day." A smile touched her lips as she remembered the changes in Paradise Valley. The ranchers had come together, forming their own security network. The new sheriff, elected after Coleman's arrest, had implemented strict oversight measures. The auction house, now under Linda Morrison's management, had become a model of transparent business practices. Commander Morrison. Olivia turned to find General Matthews, her former commanding officer, approaching with a group of officials. The old warrior's face broke into a warm smile. "Not commander anymore," Olivia corrected gently. "Just a rancher these days." "A rancher who just helped bring down one of the largest criminal enterprises we've tracked," Matthews replied. "The handler's intel is invaluable. He had connections to terrorist financing, weapons trafficking, you name it. What you started in Paradise Valley has ripple effects we're still discovering." They walked together toward the base's main building. "That's why we asked you here today. We're establishing a new task force, not just law enforcement. We're bringing in ranchers, business owners, community leaders, people who understand how these organizations target vulnerable areas. Olivia understood immediately. You want to prevent what happened in Paradise Valley from happening elsewhere. We want you to help train them, Matthews confirmed. Not as an operator, but as someone who's seen both sides, someone who understands that the best defense isn't always a direct confrontation. Rex, who had been padding silently beside them, looked up at Olivia. The Belgian Malinois seemed to sense her contemplation. She thought of Thomas, of the peace she'd found in Paradise Valley, of the community that had become her home. I won't leave the ranch, she said finally, but I could consult, help set up training programs, identify vulnerable areas, teach communities how to protect themselves. Matthews nodded, unsurprised. We thought you might say that. That's why we're proposing. Paradise Valley as a training center? Your ranch, the auction house, the terrain, it's perfect for teaching others how to secure their communities. Olivia's phone lit up with another message, this time from Jackson. Ghost teams confirmed. Handler's associates backing off. Words spreading about Paradise Valley. Nobody wants to risk running into more retired operators. Looking out over the military base, Olivia felt the weight of possibility. She'd come to Paradise Valley seeking escape from her past. Instead, she'd found a way to use that past to protect others, to turn her hard-won skills toward building something positive. Send me the details, she told Matthews. I'll review them with my people. As she drove back toward Montana, the sun setting behind the Rockies, Olivia reflected on the strange turns life could take. She'd thought her fighting days were over when she settled in Paradise Valley. Instead, she'd found a different kind of battle, not for territory or resources, but for community, for the right of people to live without fear. Rex dozed in the passenger seat as miles of highway rolled past. Paradise Valley was waiting, not just a home now, but a symbol of resistance against those who would prey on the vulnerable. Olivia Mitchell, rancher's widow and former Delta Force operator, had found her new mission. Because sometimes the best way to honor the past is to use it to protect the future. 1 year after the handler's downfall, Paradise Valley had transformed. Olivia stood at her ranch's highest point, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Below, a group of ranchers was gathering for their morning training session, part of the new security program that had made the valley a model for rural community defense. Her phone buzzed with a familiar number. Jackson, you might want to see this, the message read, followed by a link to a law enforcement bulletin. Criminal organizations across the continent had started marking certain territories as hard zones, areas too well protected to risk operating. In Paradise Valley was at the top of that list. Rex alerted beside her, his ears forward. Olivia heard the approaching vehicles before she saw them, a convoy of trucks making their way up the ranch road. But these weren't threats. They were students. Ranchers, business owners and local law enforcement from 3 states had come to learn how one small valley had stood up to organized crime and won. Quite a change from last year, Cooper said, joining her at the Overlook. The old Marine had become the program's chief instructor, teaching tactics he'd learned in the Corps alongside Olivia's Delta Force expertise. They're here from Wyoming, he continued, checking his tablet. Had trouble with rustlers hitting isolated. Ranchers wanted to see how we set up our response network. Olivia nodded, remembering how it had started. 3 outlaws thinking they could intimidate a widow, not knowing they'd picked a fight with someone trained in the world's deadliest arts. Sometimes the best deterrent is knowing your target. Might bite back. Linda Morrison's truck pulled up, the former auction house bookkeeper now running the valley's early warning system. Her network of contacts across the Northwest had already prevented several criminal groups from gaining footholds in other communities. Got word from Agent Chen, Linda reported. They arrested 3 of the handler's old lieutenants trying to set up operations in Idaho. Local ranchers spotted their scouts using the techniques we taught them. Called it in before anything could get established. Olivia's phone lit up again, this time a message from General Matthews. Training program success, getting attention at the highest levels. Pentagon interested in adapting it for civilian defense programs. You've started something bigger than Paradise Valley. Looking down at the gathering crowd, Olivia felt a deep sense of satisfaction. These weren't soldiers or operators. They were ordinary people learning to protect their communities, their way of life. The handler had thought he could own this valley through fear and intimidation. Instead, he'd sparked a revolution in rural security. Rex stood alert as the first. Students approached, ranchers, shop owners, local deputies, all here to learn. Olivia thought of Thomas, of his dream for this ranch. He'd wanted it to be more than just a cattle operation. He'd wanted it to matter, to make a difference. "Tell them what happened here," Cooper said quietly. "Not just the fight. Tell them about the community coming together, about regular people standing up to protect what's theirs." Olivia smiled, patting Rex's head. She'd come to Paradise Valley seeking peace, trying to leave behind the warrior she'd been. Instead, she'd found a way to be both, protector and teacher, fighter and builder. The skills that had made her deadly in combat now served to prevent violence, to stop criminals before they could hurt innocent communities. "Welcome to Paradise Valley," she addressed the gathered crowd. "What you learn here isn't just about security or tactics. It's about community, about standing together against those who would prey on the vulnerable. Because sometimes the most effective defense isn't a weapon or a wall. It's letting the predators know that their intended prey has teeth." As the morning sun climbed higher, Olivia Mitchell, rancher's widow, former Delta Force operator and now teacher, began sharing the lessons that had transformed a valley. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the fight, but in preventing it altogether. At sunset, after the last training session had ended and the visiting ranchers had departed, Olivia stood at Thomas's grave on the hill behind the ranch house. It was her favorite spot, offering a view of the entire valley. Rex sat faithfully beside her as golden light painted the mountains in shades of amber and purple. "You'd be proud of what this place has become," she said softly, placing fresh flowers by the headstone. "It's more than just a ranch now. It's a symbol of hope for people who thought they had to face the darkness alone." Her phone buzzed, a message from Agent Chen. "Latest intel confirms 3 more criminal organizations abandoned expansion plans in rural communities. Your reputation spreads. They're calling Paradise Valley the place where predators become prey." Olivia smiled, remembering that first confrontation with the Iron Wolves. They'd seen what they wanted to see, a widow alone, vulnerable, an easy target. They'd never suspected they were walking into the sights of a hunter far deadlier than themselves. Cooper's truck appeared on the road below, making its evening patrol. The old Marine had taken to his new role with the same dedication he'd shown in the Corps. Under his guidance, the valley's security network had become a model studied by law enforcement agencies across the country. "Olivia," his voice crackled, "over the radio. Got word from Linda. Handler's final appeal was denied. He's facing life without parole. It's really over." She thought of the handler, of his smooth sophistication masking a predator's heart. He'd built an empire, preying on isolated communities, never imagining one of those communities would fight back with the skills of a Delta Force operator. Rex's ears perked up as distant thunder rolled across the valley. A storm was coming, but Olivia wasn't worried. Paradise Valley had weathered worse storms than this. The community had learned to stand together, to protect what mattered, to be stronger than any threat that came their way. Her phone lit up one final time. A message from Jackson. "Pentagon approved expansion of the training program. 10 more. Communities requesting assistance. You didn't just save a valley, Olivia. You created a blueprint for others to follow." Looking out over the land she'd fought to protect, Olivia Mitchell felt a deep sense of peace. She'd come to Paradise Valley, seeking escape from her warrior past. Instead, she'd found a way to turn those skills towards something greater, not just fighting enemies, but building something that would last. Thunder rolled closer as the first drops of rain began to fall. Olivia and Rex made their way back to the ranch house, its warm lights glowing in the gathering dusk. Inside, maps and training documents covered her desk, plans for teaching other communities what Paradise Valley had learned.